The clinking of champagne glasses was deafening. From my vantage point near the service entrance of the city's most exclusive rooftop restaurant, I watched my family toast my brother, Leo. My father's voice, thick with pride, boomed across the elegantly dressed crowd. "To my son, Leo," he declared, raising his flute, "a self-made man, a brilliant mind, and the future husband of the lovely Chloe." My mother dabbed a tear from her eye, beaming at him. Everyone applauded. They were all so proud. They had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, a single tap on my phone screen would burn their perfect little world to the ground. They were toasting his brilliance with my money, in a venue paid for by my sweat, celebrating a life he stole directly from me. Every lie they told tonight, every compliment they showered upon him, was a ghost of a sacrifice I was forced to make. The expensive suit Leo wore. I paid for it with a bonus from a freelance coding job I worked 20-hour days to complete. The down payment for his new condo with Chloe, that came from the savings I'd meticulously built since I was a teenager, savings my parents borrowed for Leo's startup idea. His startup, his success, his entire identity. It was all a carefully constructed fraud, and I was the silent, invisible architect. For years, I was their workhorse, their scapegoat, their dirty little secret. I was the price they paid for his comfort. Tonight, I was their reckoning. I looked at the countdown timer on my custom-coded app. 2 minutes left. My thumb hovered over the big red button labeled Execute. There was no hesitation, no fear, only a profound, chilling calm. The calm of a person who had already lost everything and had nothing left to lose. You're probably wondering why I'd choose his happiest moment to unleash their worst nightmare. Why not just walk away? Why orchestrate such a public and devastating exposure? Because for 25 years, they didn't just neglect me, they systematically dismantled me, piece by piece, to build him up. They turned my life into a living hell, and tonight, the debt comes due. To understand why this had to happen, why justice had to be this absolute, you have to understand how it all began. It started not with hatred, but with a broken promise, and a family that decided one child was worth more than the other. There were 2 children in our house, but my parents only ever saw one. From the very beginning, Leo was the sun, and I was the shadow he cast. He was charming, loud, and demanding, so he got their attention. I was quiet, observant, and independent, so I was left to raise myself. The roles were set so early, I don't think I ever knew anything different. He was the project, I was the resource. This wasn't a secret. It was just the operating system of our family. The first time I truly understood this, I was 12 years old. I had spent an entire year saving every dollar from odd jobs, mowing lawns, babysitting, washing cars, to buy my first computer. It wasn't fancy, just a basic desktop from a second-hand store, but to me, it was a gateway to another universe. I wanted to learn how to code, to build things, to understand how the digital world worked. I had $350 saved in a shoebox under my bed, just $50 shy of the price tag. The week I was finally going to buy it, Leo, who was 14, decided he needed the newest video game console. It was all he would talk about. He'd throw tantrums, slam doors, and complain about how all his friends had one, and he was a social outcast. My parents, as always, scrambled to appease him. The problem was the console cost $400, and they didn't have the money. I remember my mother coming into my room one night, her smile strained. She sat on my bed and told me what a good, responsible daughter I was. She talked about the importance of family and helping each other out. Then she asked to borrow my shoebox of money for Leo. "It's just for a little while, sweetheart," she promised. "We'll pay you back as soon as your father gets his next bonus. It's so important for Leo's social development." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I knew, with the certainty only a neglected child can have, that I would never see that money again. I handed over the box. Leo got his console. I never got my computer. The pattern was set. My needs were disposable. His wants were emergencies. This was the first lesson, and it would be repeated in countless ways for the next decade. That broken promise over the computer became the blueprint for my entire life. As we moved through high school, the dynamic only intensified. I discovered a passion for programming, teaching myself Python and Java from library books and free online courses. I joined the computer club and won state-level coding competitions. My parents barely noticed. When I brought home a trophy, my mother would say, "That's nice, dear," before asking me to help Leo with his math homework. Leo, meanwhile, coasted on his charm. His grades were average. He had no real interests besides sports and being popular, but my parents spoke of his future in glowing terms. "He's a natural leader," my father would say after Leo was elected captain of the soccer team. "He has a charisma you just can't teach." They saw his potential. They only saw my utility. The real breaking point, the one that hollowed me out for years, came when we were applying to college. I earned a significant scholarship to study computer science at a good state university. It wasn't my dream school, but it was my ticket out, a chance to finally build something for myself. I was ecstatic. A week later, Leo was accepted into a private, out-of-state business school with a laughable price tag. There was no scholarship, just a mountain of tuition fees. Our house erupted in celebration. This, to our parents, was the real victory. It didn't matter that my grades were better or that I had earned my place through merit. His acceptance letter had a more prestigious name on it, and that was all that mattered. The night before I was set to pay my first tuition deposit, my parents sat me down for the talk. It was the same hollow tone my mother used when she took my computer money. They explained that they couldn't afford Leo's tuition and living expenses. They had taken out loans, but it wasn't enough. "You've always been so good with responsibility," my dad said, not looking me in the eye. "Leo needs to be able to focus on his studies. He can't be burdened with a job." The request was unspoken, but hung in the air, thick and suffocating. They wanted my part-time job earnings. They wanted my scholarship surplus. They wanted me to scale back my own future to finance his. "A degree from a place like that will lift the whole family up," my mother added, sealing the deal. I felt the familiar cold knot tighten in my stomach. I was 18 and I was already exhausted, but I said yes. For the next 4 years, I worked 2 jobs while going to school full-time. My life was a miserable cycle of coding assignments, waiting tables, and transferring my earnings into an account for Leo. I paid for his textbooks, his rent, and his beer money, while I survived on instant noodles. I was funding the life they wanted for him, and invisibly, they were all celebrating on my dime. After 4 years of grinding, I graduated with honours and a job offer from a major tech firm. My starting salary was modest, but it was mine. Leo graduated with a C average, a sense of entitlement, and 0 job prospects. For 6 months, he lived at home, complaining about the unfair job market, while I continued to send money to my parents to help cover the student loans they had co-signed for him. During that time, I was pouring every spare moment into my own project, an app I called Nexus. It was a sophisticated logistics platform designed to help small businesses manage their supply chains. It was my baby, the culmination of years of self-taught skills and formal education. It was complex, elegant, and had huge market potential. In a foolish moment of hope, seeking just an ounce of the approval they gave Leo for breathing, I showed it to them. I walked them through the interface on my laptop. I explained the algorithm I had designed, the market research I'd done, the business plan I was drafting. My dad nodded, looking vaguely impressed. My mum said it seemed very complicated. Leo, however, leaned in, asking pointed questions about monetization, scalability, and user acquisition. I mistook his probing for genuine interest. I thought for the first time he might actually respect what I could do. I was a fool. I gave him a copy of my business proposal, thinking he might have some useful insights from his expensive degree. That was the biggest mistake of my life. 2 months later, my parents called me, their voices trembling with excitement. "You won't believe the news," my mother chirped. "Leo did it. He's a genius. He got his first round of seed funding." I felt my blood run cold. "Funding for what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "For his startup," my father boomed. "It's an incredible logistics app called Nexus." I sat there in stunned silence as he proceeded to describe my project, my features, my business plan, back to me. When I finally found my voice, I confronted them. "That's mine," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "That's my app, my code, my plan." There was a pause. Then Leo's voice came on the speakerphone, dripping with condescension. "You built a cute little school project. I built a business. There's a difference." My parents immediately rushed to his defense. "Don't be jealous, honey," my mother said. "Leo has the vision to make it a success. This is good for the whole family." It was then that I finally understood. They weren't just bystanders, they were accomplices. They truly believed his theft was justified because he was the golden child, and I was just the help. They had stolen my future and gift-wrapped it for him. That was the day the daughter they knew died. In her place, something cold, patient, and methodical began to grow. After that phone call, I didn't yell or cry. I simply hung up the phone. For the first time in my life, the suffocating fog of obligation had lifted, replaced by a stark, absolute clarity. They would never change. They would never see me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource to be mined until I was empty. The proof came 3 days later. My mother called, her voice breezy and casual, as if nothing had happened. "Honey," she began, "Leo is just so swamped with all these investor meetings. He's having a little trouble with some of the technical back end of the app. Would you mind just hopping on a call with him and walking him through it? You always were so good at that stuff." I could hear Leo coaching her in the background. The audacity was breathtaking. They didn't just want my past work, they wanted my ongoing, unpaid labor to support the company they had stolen from me. That was the moment the switch flipped. I said, "I have to go," and hung up. That night, I requested a transfer within my company. There was an opening in a branch 3,000 miles away. I took it. I packed 2 suitcases with my clothes and my computer, sold the rest of my furniture, and bought a one-way plane ticket. Before I left for the airport, I sent a single text to my parents' phones. "You made your choice, now live with it." Then I blocked their numbers. I blocked Leo. I blocked my enabling aunts and uncles. I scrubbed my social media and essentially vanished from their world. For the first 2 years, I focused solely on myself. I poured all the energy I had once wasted on my family into my career. I was promoted twice. I bought a small condo. I built a life, a real one, on my own terms. It was quiet and stable, but it wasn't enough. Justice hadn't been served, so I started watching. From the quiet of my home office, I became a digital ghost haunting Nexus. I read their quarterly reports. I followed their executives on professional networks. I watched Leo give interviews, spouting business jargon he barely understood, taking credit for my elegant code. He was the king of a castle I had designed, and he was a careless king. I knew the architecture of that company better than he ever would because I had laid the foundation. And I knew that deep in that foundation there were secrets, there were vulnerabilities. Leo, in his arrogance and incompetence, was surely creating more every day. I didn't need to break in. I still had the original blueprints. I just needed to be patient and wait for the perfect moment to pull the entire structure down on top of him. For months, my evenings were dedicated to a single purpose: mapping the digital ghost of Nexus. I didn't need to hack them in the traditional sense. A hacker breaks in through a window they find. I, on the other hand, had built the house. I knew where the secret passages were. In the original architecture of Nexus, I had built an extensive, encrypted logging system for debugging purposes. It was my private workshop, a place to track data flow and system performance. I never documented it. I knew Leo's ego. He'd hire cheap developers who would either be too incompetent to find it or too lazy to remove it. I was right. Using a secure key only I possessed, I slipped into the back end of their system, completely undetected. It was like walking through the walls of my old home. The logs were a gold mine. They were a perfect, immutable record of every action taken by every user with administrative privileges. And since Leo insisted on being the sole top-level administrator to maintain control, his digital fingerprints were on everything. I started by pulling transaction records and cross-referencing them with the company's public filings and investor reports. The picture that emerged was one of staggering, arrogant fraud. Leo wasn't just skimming off the top. He was treating the company's bank account like his personal ATM. Investor capital, meant for hiring engineers and marketing, was being funneled to pay for his life of luxury. I wrote a script to organize the data, and it painted a masterpiece of deceit. There was the $80,000 wire transfer to a luxury car dealership, categorized as on-site client hardware. There were thousands spent on 5-star hotels and Michelin-star restaurants in cities where Nexus had no clients, all labeled business development. But the final, most poetic piece of evidence came from a single massive wire transfer to a famous high-end jeweler. The date on the transfer was 2 days before Leo's flashy public proposal to Chloe on a yacht in the Caribbean. He didn't just buy the engagement ring with company money. He likely paid for the entire proposal trip with it. He was funding the celebration of his future on a mountain of lies. I downloaded everything, the encrypted logs, the corresponding bank statements I acquired through legal public channels, the social media posts where he flaunted his purchases. I compiled it all into a single password-protected file, a digital bomb. Then, one day, I saw a post from a distant cousin on social media, a picture of Leo and Chloe with the caption, "She said yes. Can't wait to celebrate at the engagement party." The venue was chosen. The date was set. It was time to deliver my masterpiece. The engagement announcement was a gift. It gave me a date, a time, and a location. The Skyview Terrace at the Grand Astoria, the perfect stage. For the next 2 weeks, the target of my obsession shifted from Nexus to the venue itself. From my apartment, I did a full digital workup. I found their floor plans, their IT vendors, and the make and model of their integrated audio-visual system. It was a popular corporate brand, one whose security protocols I knew intimately. It took me less than a day to find a backdoor vulnerability and gain access to the server that controlled the half-dozen large screens scattered throughout the banquet hall. The screens that were, at that moment, cycling through a nauseatingly sweet slideshow of photos of Leo and Chloe. My own presentation was already uploaded and waiting. I had spent a week creating it. It wasn't just a data dump, it was a story, a cold, clean narrative of fraud. It began with the happy photos they'd shared, then seamlessly cross-faded to bank statements. It showed the purchase of Leo's sports car next to the fake invoice he'd submitted. It showed his vacation photos from Bali next to the expense report, claiming he was at a tech conference in Cleveland. The final sequence was the most damning, a close-up of Chloe's hand, her diamond ring sparkling, followed by the jeweler's invoice for $50,000, and the internal Nexus wire transfer, signed by Leo, that paid for it, fraudulently labeled Capital Investment Server Upgrades. I coded a simple app on my phone, one button. When pressed, it would send a secure command to the server, hijack the screens, and play my video on a continuous loop with the volume set to maximum. And so here I stand, back in the city I once fled, a ghost at their feast. I flew in this morning, checked into a hotel down the street, and walked in with the rest of the guests, my name not on any list. No one has noticed me. Why would they? In their eyes, I was never really there to begin with. I watch my mother fawn over Chloe, telling her what a brilliant and successful man she's marrying. I watch my father clap Leo on the back, his chest puffed out with a pride he never once showed me. They are all swimming in the spoils of my stolen work, celebrating a lie I am about to expose. My phone buzzes softly in my hand. The timer has hit 30 seconds. My thumb rests on the smooth glass over the button. I take a deep breath, the air thick with expensive perfume and ignorance. The show is about to begin. 10 seconds. I watched Leo raise his glass again, about to offer another self-congratulatory toast. 9. My mother gazed at him, her face a perfect portrait of maternal adoration. 8. My father stood beside him, a pillar of vicarious success. 7. The guests were smiling, caught in the glow of manufactured happiness. 6. Chloe stared at the diamond on her finger, the physical embodiment of all their dreams. 5. They were all so perfectly, beautifully oblivious. 4. I took one last look at their faces, memorizing the precise moment before their world shattered. 3, 2, 1, 0. My thumb pressed the button. For a single beautiful second, nothing happened. Then, all at once, every screen in the banquet hall went black. The romantic pop song that was playing died abruptly, plunging the room into a stunned, awkward silence. A few people laughed nervously. The restaurant manager, looking flustered, began hurrying towards the AV controls. Leo let out a small, annoyed sigh, clearly thinking it was just a technical problem. "Just a moment, everyone," he said, his voice still full of false confidence. "Looks like we have a little glitch." But it wasn't a glitch, it was a demolition. The screens flickered back to life, not with the smiling photos, but with the crisp, unmistakable logo of Nexus. Below it, in huge, bold letters, an expense report appeared. Vendor, Prestige Motors. Amount, $80,000. Purpose, on-site client hardware. A low murmur went through the crowd. Then a second image appeared beside it, a screenshot from Leo's public social media, showing him grinning beside a brand new silver convertible. The caption read, "Hard work pays off, CEO life." The murmurs grew louder. The video continued, relentless and cold. A photo of Leo and Chloe on a beach in Bali, juxtaposed with a travel invoice for a tech conference in Cleveland. A receipt from a luxury watch store for $20,000, filed as office supplies. The guests were no longer confused, they were transfixed, pulling out their phones to record the unfolding disaster. Leo's face had gone from tan to a pasty, sickly white. He was staring at the screens, his mouth hanging open, his eyes wide with pure terror. He knew this was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. The final sequence began, and I saw Chloe's hand instinctively cover the ring on her finger. Too late. The jeweler's invoice filled every screen. The video froze on the final damning invoice. The only sound in the dead silent room was a gut-wrenching sob from Chloe. She ripped the diamond ring from her finger and hurled it across the marble floor, where it skittered to a stop under a table. The spell was broken. Chaos erupted. "Shut it down! Somebody shut it down now!" Leo bellowed, his voice cracking with panic and rage. My father, his face a mask of purple fury, was screaming at the restaurant manager. Guests were backing away, their phones held high, capturing every second of the spectacular implosion of my family. That was my cue. I began to walk from the back of the room. My steps were measured and silent. The crowd of onlookers parted for me, their whispers following in my wake. My mother was the first to see me. Her jaw dropped, a silent no forming on her lips. Then Leo's wild eyes found mine. The recognition was instantaneous, followed by a tidal wave of pure murderous rage. "You!" he shrieked, a vein throbbing in his temple as he pointed a trembling finger at me. "It was you! You ruined my life!" I stopped just a few feet away from the wreckage of his engagement party, meeting his gaze without a flicker of emotion. My voice, when I spoke, was unnaturally calm, cutting through the noise like a shard of ice. "Yes, Leo, I did." His face contorted, and he took a step toward me, but I didn't flinch. "I didn't ruin your life," I continued, my voice steady. "Your life was a lie. You built a career on theft, and you're celebrating with the proceeds of fraud. This isn't a ruin, it's a correction." I turned my cold gaze to my parents, who were staring at me as if I were a monster who had just crawled from the sea. "And you too. You held me down so he could use my back as a stepping stool. You told me my sacrifices were for the good of the family. Was this it? Was this the glorious future you stole from me to give to him?" Finally, I looked at the weeping Chloe. "That ring he gave you. It's evidence in a federal fraud case. Congratulations on the engagement." Just then, 2 burly security guards arrived. My father's face lit up with vicious relief. "There, arrest her. She's the one who did this," he yelled. The guards glanced at my father, then looked directly at me. The lead guard gave a short, respectful nod in my direction and stood perfectly still. My father and Leo stared, utterly bewildered. They thought this was the end of the show. It was only the intermission. My father sputtered, his face turning an even deeper shade of red. "What is the meaning of this? Why aren't you doing anything? I order you to remove her." He was so used to his authority being absolute, he couldn't process the scene. I almost felt a flicker of pity for him. Almost. I gave a small, humorless smile. "They don't listen to you, Dad," I said, my voice clear and calm. "They listen to the person who signs their paychecks, or, in this case, the person whose company holds the master contract for security for this entire hotel chain." The confusion on their faces was exquisite. They still thought this was about a family squabble. They had no idea this was a corporate takeover. "You see," I continued, turning my full attention to Leo, whose terror was now mingled with utter bewilderment. "While you were busy playing CEO and embezzling funds to buy shiny things, I was actually working. I climbed the ladder at a real tech firm. I became a senior director, and my firm, as it happens, has a very successful venture capital division. We look for promising tech startups that are being mismanaged." I let that hang in the air for a moment. Companies with a solid core product but with dangerously incompetent leadership. Companies exactly like Nexus. Leo's eyes widened as the horrifying realization began to dawn. "No," he whispered. "No, you didn't." "Oh, yes," I said. 3 weeks ago, my firm's holding company, Innovate Forward LLC, acquired a 70% controlling stake in Nexus. Your board was desperate for a cash infusion to avoid bankruptcy. They signed the papers without asking too many questions. I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a confidential, lethal whisper. "You've been so busy planning a wedding, you forgot to read the fine print. You don't run Nexus, Leo. You are a mid-level employee in a company that I own. You work for me." I let him absorb the full weight of that statement before delivering the final blow. "Or rather, you worked for me. As of this moment, your employment is terminated, effective immediately, for felony-level fraud. Your corporate accounts have been frozen, and your access has been revoked. Security," I said, turning to the guards, "will now escort this former employee off the premises." I then addressed the stunned guests. "My firm will be cooperating fully with the authorities to ensure Mr. Leo is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. As for tonight," I said, nodding to the manager, "please send the entire bill for this party to my corporate account. It appears my family is about to have some liquidity issues." The two guards took Leo by the arms. The touch seemed to jolt him out of his shock and into a pathetic, snivelling panic. He tried to wrench himself free, his expensive suit wrinkling. "Wait! Stop, please!" he cried, his voice breaking. He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. "I'm your brother! You can't do this to me! We're family!" It was then that my mother, her face a mess of ruined makeup and desperation, rushed past him and grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Please," she sobbed, her voice thick with a lifetime of practiced victimhood. "Don't do this. You're tearing this family apart. How could you be so heartless after everything we've done for you?" That was the line, the final delusional lie that I had been waiting my whole life to correct. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back to her face. My voice was quiet, but it silenced the entire room. "Everything you've done for me? You have it backwards. You never did anything for me. You did everything to me." I gently but firmly pried her fingers off my sleeve. "You want to talk about family? A family doesn't cannibalize one child to feed the other. A family doesn't treat one daughter like a workhorse and the other son like a prince. That's not love. That's resource management. And I was your only resource." I looked from her tear-streaked face to my father, who stood frozen in shame, and finally to Leo, who was now limp between the two guards. "You taught me what my place was. I was the foundation, meant to be invisible, meant to hold everything up without ever getting any credit. You thought my resilience was for you to use. You were wrong. My resilience was for me to survive you. You built this world on my back, and you were shocked when I finally decided to stand up." I took a step back, creating a final, unbridgeable distance between us. "You ask me how I could do this to my family. You are not my family. You are a bad investment I have finally written off. This isn't revenge. It's just balancing the books." Without another glance, I turned my back on the wreckage. I walked calmly through the parted crowd, past the gawking guests and toward the exit. As the guards began to drag a wailing Leo away, I pushed open the glass doors and stepped out into the night, free.